Welcome to Dave's Faves, the series where I talk about games that I believe are the best of the bunch, despite their lack of whoopers. And today, we're getting old school. Well, at least by modern standards anyway. Remember when Skyrim won Steam's Test of Time award despite only being 5 years old? Well, I thought there was a more fitting candidate among those nominated. Age of Empires 2. I mean, come on, at least that game was actually old. Nonetheless, among the other games nominated was a game that I believe is one of the best shooters of all time, and is still clinging to life on the Steam platform. It actually still has a surprisingly high player base. It's the action-packed, arena-shooting, hat-collecting, spy-killing bonanza, Team Fortress 2. For a game that is over 10 years old now, Team Fortress 2 is doing pretty well for itself. It still has a relatively strong player base, and still managed to be pretty damn fun after all these years. TF2 is a great example of how to create not only a game, but an atmosphere. Among the characters that are the 9 playable classes, amplified by the pre-release promotion of the game, this game has a very distinct identity. I think that the game has had a lasting impact on the games industry as a whole. In some cases, the impact could be seen as a little negative, but it has paved the way for many shooters after it. Overwatch being the prime example I can think of, but there's plenty more. It's the only game I've clocked over 1,000 hours into on Steam, and I'm only slightly ashamed to say that, because Team Fortress 2 is without a doubt my most played, and dare I say, most loved shooter game. For some people, it might be hard to believe that the class-based arena shooter genre existed before Overwatch. But it certainly did, and in my opinion, it did it better. One of my favourite things about TF2 is the fact that it isn't horrendously unbalanced. Of course there's a pretty strict structure in competitive play, but for the most part, especially in casual, each class has the capacity to kick ass. Unlike other games such as, well, Overwatch, TF2 doesn't flood you with a large roster with only a handful of viable characters that is constantly changing due to the developer's inability to buff and nerf characters accordingly. We just got these 9 fellas, and that's all we need. As I mentioned, a good player can do well with any of the classes. There's no one class that is ridiculously better than any other, and of course they all have their own specific perks and counters. Each class can also have multiple playstyles due to the weapon and loadout system. For example, a demo man can either be a sticky bomb spamming scumbag, or they can be demo knight with a sword and shield. Or an engineer can be a normal defensive engie, or they can use a gunslinger to play more aggressively with mini sentries. Having the varied loadouts helps create more diversity within the more limited amount of classes, without having each class stray too far away from its intended playstyle. The gunplay and combat is fairly straightforward and simple. TF2 doesn't flood you with numerous confusing abilities and maneuvers. You know what you're doing and how you're doing it. You don't just charge up a bar and press Q to win, except for maybe with Medic, but there's much more room for a skilled player to do well in this game, which I think further ties in the fact that there's not one class that is miles ahead of any other in terms of viability. There's a bunch of different game modes to play as well: Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Attack Defense, Control Points, Payload Race, and more. And even community created game modes like Versus Sax and Howl mode, which can be easily accessed through Steam Workshop integration. Possibly one of Steam's only redeeming features these days. Much of the objective-based gameplay is fairly simple. You capture the intelligence, you take the point, you push the payload. It's simple, but the formula works. And I think that's the most solid part of TF2's gameplay. It's simple, but it has a sense of depth to how you approach it. It doesn't just throw fancy special attacks and team-wiping power-ups at you. You just get in and get the job done. A good team composition is important, and team coordination is more than you all just pressing Q at the same time. There's more availability for a good player to do well, and more availability for a cooperating team to dominate. There's also a bunch of little gameplay features that add to the experience, like the domination and revenge mechanics, as well as when you get to run around and kill the team that loses at the end of the match. It's the little things like these that really embellish the gameplay and your enjoyment. Or sometimes your frustration. The community on TF2 isn't exactly the best community out there, but I don't think it's quite as bad as some people might make it out to be. I remember recently seeing a news article about Team Fortress 2's shocking toxicity problem, which cited a few rather disgraceful comments and tweets from and about some of the members of the TF2 community. But from all my years of playing TF2 and revisiting the game lately, I really don't see a massive issue with that sort of thing. Sure, look, the community can be questionable at best sometimes, but it's much better than your CSGOs, your Rocket Leagues, And to be honest, it's less toxic than Overwatch is. Plus, you can't get banned for spamming voice lines in TF2, which is a good thing because that's like half the fun. I find a lot of the time there's some good to be found in the community. TF2 is practically the only game where it isn't always everyone's first response to simply just try and kill each other. Sometimes you'll head outside and both teams are having a party together. The worst you generally get in TF2 is people complaining about other players capturing when you're playing a capture the flag map, or people complaining about someone killing them while being adamant that said person is bad, or you get someone like this.
You fucking killed me! Oh. Big poo-poo. Why is kicking me?
But that's just the general stuff you get in an online shooter, really. One of the big issues I do have with TF2 is arguably the awful thing it's done to the games industry. And that's loot boxes. It's hard to argue that TF2 wasn't one of the pioneers of the loot box system when it came out with the whole Manco supply crate thing, requiring you to buy a key to open these crates that you periodically acquire for a randomized reward, because that's exactly what a fucking loot box is. And yeah, you can throw the whole it's only cosmetic argument at me as much as you want, but Valve has made a shit ton of money off of this game despite not charging you for it, and this formula has been tried and tested in many other games since. And I'm guilty. I've put more money into this game than I'd really like to admit, which I guess I can find some solace in knowing how much time I've spent on it as well, but still, it's a money-making scheme. And I feel that it set the precedent for not only the industry as a whole, but for Valve. Ever since this and the CSGO skin scene, Valve have done next to nothing other than be a money factory. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see anything of real value from them ever again. You know, I say aesthetic a lot, but I think that a fitting style and design is a very important part of a game. And I'm not just talking about cutting edge graphics, but an overall visual and sound design that is fitting and, well, enjoyable. TF2's more exaggerated and cartoony style fits well into the overall theme, which is that it's a little bit ridiculous. It also helps the game from looking too outdated, as it's aged much better than the visuals of a Valve game such as Half-Life has. For an easy comparison, all I'm saying is that in 10 years, PUBG is going to look even worse than it already does, and Fortnite is not going to look that bad, because of its stylistic choice. The visuals are accompanied by plenty of audio, but where TF2 excels is not in its music, but in the voice lines of the characters themselves. Each class has its own specific voice lines which can be done on command or will happen in accordance to something happening. For example, in reaction to you dominating someone or being healed by a medic. The 9 classes are not only identified by their playstyle and appearance, but what they say and their general tone. In the end, it creates a really good atmosphere. Comedic and lighthearted, while at the same time rather dark. Some of the stuff that gets said and done in this game is just ridiculous, and I love it. Coming back to the music, I wouldn't like to imply that it's bad, because it certainly isn't. Obviously you don't have the music pumping all of the time in the background, it's generally only in the menus and whatnot, but the OST is again very fitting for the aesthetic and is pretty damn good in terms of quality. The way that Valve marketed this game with the Meet the Team videos was genius, and the subsequent swath of fan created content including the Source Filmmaker and Gary's mod videos was a testament to it. Team Fortress 2 is a great example of how to create a specific atmosphere and setting for a game, and hit it home with visuals and audio to match. In the end, Team Fortress 2 endures as my favourite shooter, certainly one of my most played games ever. If not for the gameplay, it's one of my favourite games for its atmosphere. The characters, the setting, the ridiculous nature of it all. It really amplifies the experience you have with this game. That being said, the gameplay is still clean and to the point. No gimmicks, no confusion, you just get in and play the game and have fun. The game modes and objectives are pretty simple. It's the depth of the classes and how they go up against each other that keeps the gameplay fresh and exciting, even after all of these years. The variety of different ways that each class can be played as well as the consistent humorous tone is a good testament to how well this game has held its relevance over 10 years down the track. And yeah, look, there aren't any whoopers in this game, which understandably makes me pretty damn angry. They could have had them as a cosmetic or something, but maybe it's best that they're not associated with that whole cosmetic loot box scene. Despite this, Team Fortress 2 manages to maintain its distinct identity and will always be one of my favourite games, even if I don't play it quite as much as I used to. simply because of the impact it's had on me, and all the fond memories I have of it all. I think that many aspects of this game's mechanics and design have contributed to its longevity, and I think it's fair to say that it has truly stood the test of time. And it will always be better than Overwatch. Fuck you, Blizzard. So thanks for watching this episode of Dave's Faves. Hope you enjoyed this little insight into one of my favourite video games. This was for 5,000 subs, and this video is also a little late again, but thanks again to everyone who's been subscribing to me over the last few months, and those of you who have been here for a little while now. I promise I'm not dead, I'm just busy. But I have quite a few video ideas lined up now, so I'm looking forward to bringing them to you. So thanks again for watching, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you smash that like button, because if I hit 7,500 subscribers, I'll bring you the next installment of Dave's Faves.